Welcome to the show, everybody. It's the Crypto Lark. Super excited to have with me today Naomi Brockwell. You might know her as the Bitcoin Girl. Welcome, Naomi.
Hi, good to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Art, my pleasure indeed. Now, can you just tell anyone who hasn't kind of heard of you a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my main involvement in the crypto space, I MC a lot of conferences, like between 20 and 40 a year, consensus events, D10E, a lot of things in the Liberty space as well. My real job, on top of that, I'm a television producer. So I produce for John Stossel, but I also have my own show, which is called Bitcoin, Blockchain, and the Technologies of Our Future. And I interview a lot of people in the space and make the most of my travels as an MC, just finding out what's going on in the world in the blockchain area. So it's pretty fun.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun. Certainly getting, having your ear to the ground, going to all these conferences and, getting the message out there, and of course, meeting all these
Absolutely.
interesting people. And so I think you've got a really great insider perspective. How have you seen the space really changing over the years?
Right. I mean, it's fascinating. So the D10E conference that I do, we do at least two a month, all in a different country each time. And it's fascinating to see how everything changes in the space depending on the country you're in. Generally, like if you just go to American conferences, they have a very specific perspective. They're dealing with certain legislation, policies. They have different problems to solve. Other countries don't necessarily have the same problems. So it's really interesting to see how the landscape differs in terms of like temporally how the space has changed. So I guess, I mean, I've been in Bitcoin for about 5 years now, and it's actually changed so much. It's incredible. It started out as this very small libertarian movement, and the type of dialogue that you'd hear at these conferences was all about, how do we take control back of the money supply? How do we, get government out of our lives with incredible overreach that's going on? And now the conversation is, how do you work with regulators to make the most money and optimize your ICO? How do you incorporate Wall Street into your business? How do you entice them and get them involved in Bitcoin? And it's a very different conversation, a very different type of people. I mean, I love the Bitcoin space for the same reasons as when I started. I still think that it's such an empowering tool. I think a lot of people new to the space don't necessarily see it the same way. A lot of people are in it to make money very quickly, but then you have a lot of people who are legitimately, they recognize, they may not be libertarian, but they recognize that blockchain can solve a lot of problems, and they're legitimately trying to incorporate this technology into problems that they see in the world. So that's really exciting too, to see how the space has evolved there. Now, like Jason King has this great quote that, when he first started out in the blockchain space, we just called it Bitcoin because that's all we have. So I say that I'm in the Bitcoin space, but obviously today it includes all these different cryptocurrencies as well as blockchain technology, which doesn't necessarily have a currency base being applied to all these different fields. So it's fascinating to see how the space has evolved.
Yeah, it's dizzying, I think, to actually
Yeah.
see how many new projects are coming out all the time and how much is actually happening out there. It's hard to keep track of without a doubt, and it's easy to just say, yeah, Bitcoin, guys. Let's just
Right.
keep it at that.
Like an umbrella for it all.
Now, what do you maybe see as some of the, I guess, the coming trends? What do you see as kind of being the next big things in the space?
Oh gosh, I'm like the worst person to ask about. I don't come from a techie point of view. I come from an economics background. I like the underlying philosophy of Bitcoin. If we're talking about a trend in terms of that, I hope that we see people get more control over the money. I hope that we see people taking responsibility for their purchases, not inviting government in to regulate everything. I think that blockchain is a very fluid and very fast moving space. So I want to see the innovators give it as much leeway as they can handle, because otherwise it'll just cripple the technology, as we've seen with
Yeah.
the bit license in New York. All the companies just immediately moved out of New York. So I hope that the trend is allowing this innovation to flourish. I also say, I mean, you had the altcoin bubble where every second person's creating a new altcoin, and did they have a different function than the last one? Probably not. Are they pretty shit? Yeah, they're probably pretty shit. And then that bubble kind of bursts, and then we have the ICO bubble where everyone's like, I'm doing an ICO, I'm gonna get in on this pie. And you know what the next thing is after the ICO bubble sort of disappears, I don't even know. I don't know, but I hope that it's awesome, and I hope that it's empowering for people rather than empowering for governments.
I like it. That's definitely a good perspective. Now, Bitcoin as an investment for a lot of people can be really scary. I think for us who've, you know, are kind of in the space, we're like, yeah, drops down to 6,000. What are you gonna do? But
Right.
I guess, what do you see as being sort of the things that are stopping more Main Street investors from getting involved in Bitcoin? And maybe also, what do you think is actually stopping so much institutional money from coming into Bitcoin?
I think there's a huge amount of institutional money coming into Bitcoin right now. The number of VC funds that I have seen come into the Bitcoin space, especially at conferences, is through the roof. I emceed Consensus Invest at the start of the year, and that's the CoinDesk conference. Was the start of the year, end of last year? I think end of last year, actually. But that was a conference primarily targeted towards institutional investors, which was really interesting. The average person, I mean, again, like I just went back to Australia for Christmas, and all of my friends, because they've been hearing me talk about this for forever, when I was like, hey guys, Bitcoin's this cool thing. And they're like, Naomi, shut up. No one cares about this weird esoteric thing you're talking about. And now I go back and they're like, oh, Naomi, my boyfriend's hairdresser's dog wash man has just invested in Bitcoin. And I'm like, oh, okay. But my advice to everyone is just like, be really careful. It's very volatile. Don't invest more than you want to lose. When I first got into Bitcoin, you know, it's just like this small amount of money that I was like, okay, if this disappears, then oh well, you know, it was fun and I liked the ethos of it. I hope that it wouldn't disappear because I really believe in the empowering tech of Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, if it goes up and down, you know, don't invest more than you're willing to lose. And that's the advice I give to everyone. In terms of the barriers to entry for a lot of these people, there's so much noise out there. There's so many scammers out there. One of my friends just tweeted out a new video, the Magical Crypto Friends video, which if you haven't seen that, they're hilarious, amazing. But on just in that thread, you just have like spam after spam after spam. And it's the first time I've really been hit with all of these people saying like, you know, you want to make $1 million in the next 5 minutes? Click here and subscribe to our Bitcoin thing. And it was like, I was like, whoa, my God. So no wonder there are people scared off. Like, I'm lucky that all of my friends are in this space. You know, I know some awesome people who are, you know, reputable. Like when I don't know whether a company is good or bad, I can reach out to all these people and say, what do you know about the founders? What do you know about the tech? And I just get really great advice. But for the average person, they're not in this space. They're, you know, just hearing about it on the mainstream media. So how can you tell the good from the bad? And I think that's the biggest barrier to entry, just the inability to get good information about companies and about which wallet is an actual wallet and not a scam. You know, it's hard for people to filter through all the noise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just such a good point. There's so much misinformation and disinformation out there. It's just, yeah, it's really tricky to actually try and say, hey, this is reputable or good or whatever it might be. So
it's like the new Viagra spam, you know, increase your penis size by 1,000%. Now I'm like, increase your crypto portfolio by 1 trillion, bazillion percent. And it's like, hang on, is 1 trillion, bazillion really a number? And it's just like, it can be a dodgy space to be in if you don't know who's who and what's actually going on.
I guess how much Bitcoin you own has become the replacement for having a sports car.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maybe we should tweet that out, like Bitcoin spam, the new Viagra. I don't know.
You know, it's really interesting what you mentioned too about venture capital, because the ICO space is becoming really quite nuts right now. Some of the absolute top, most interesting ICOs, they don't even go to a main sale. They simply sell out to VC investors in the pre-sale.
Absolutely.
They don't, public never even gets them. Or if the public does get them, they get a sliver really for marketing purposes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. So yeah, the space is definitely evolving in a weird way as far as all that VC money coming in.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about Bitcoin in relation to, I guess, the world context. Why do you think Bitcoin has become so popular in third world countries?
Third world countries. Well, I mean, you take a place like Venezuela where they have just capital controls, only a certain amount people can access from their bank account a day, total freezing of assets and government control all around. So Bitcoin to them represents some means of survival that they currently don't have. I mean, you have children fainting in classrooms because they're starving. You have lines around the block. You have people lining up for 24 hours to get a bag of flour. When they get to the front of the line at the grocery store, there's no food left. So what recourse do these people have? Now, when you have the government also putting price controls on the price of electricity, you get a very cheap money printing device if you can mine Bitcoin. Mining Bitcoin is not profitable for most of the world, but if the government is stupid enough to have be involved with price fixing, then it becomes actually very beneficial for the people there. So you've seen Bitcoin there become a lifeline for some people, where they will mine Bitcoin and then they'll buy goods on the internet from Amazon or Walmart, and they'll find ways around to ship them in secretly, and they'll be feeding their whole communities. So that's an example of where government control obviously has led to the demise of a country and complete poverty, and people are finding a way around it by having more freedom with their money. So that's really exciting. But also in places, with not necessarily Bitcoin, but different blockchain technologies. I know that Patrick Byrne currently is involved with an awesome project where he really wants to explore property deeds, property titles, and get them on a blockchain, because access to bank accounts and access to the credits and all of these things in a lot of countries is non-existent, because people have no proof of who they are. In Western world, we use our property where we're living, where we're staying, as our ownership of things as a means of identifying who we are. And if you have a country where you just don't have property titles, how do you prove who you are? How do you get a bank account? So these are unbanked people, and it's just the market for it is huge. There's so many people in the world who are either unbanked or underbanked. And for them, Bitcoin really represents access to a global financial marketplace for the first time ever. And blockchain technology represents the ability for them to potentially even be integrated into the existing financial system. So there's just huge potential there, not just for people in America who want to buy Bitcoin, but people in third world countries who are actually using this as a means of bringing themselves out of poverty.
Excellent points. And I think a lot of people actually don't realize, living in America or New Zealand or something like that, how actually incredibly useful this technology is and has been for people in other countries where they're actually using it on a day-to-day basis. People are transacting in it. They're getting their groceries using it and all these different things. So it's really actually very vital for these countries where their local currencies suck. Inflation is out of control for these people. So it's definitely very problematic. I've heard that there's a whole black market transportation system from Miami to Venezuela, by the way. This gets, everybody knows it's there, but you have to have money to access it.
Well, that's the thing, right? So black markets differ completely in different countries. In America, the black market, consists of drugs and that sort of thing. And then in China, the black market consists of their groceries and basic medicine needed for survival and clothing. So depending on how totalitarian the regime is, black markets are completely different. So Bitcoin across the board is great for black markets. As long as you take the necessary steps to remain anonymous, there are obviously a lot of other coins that exist at the moment that have better privacy features than Bitcoin. But cryptocurrency in general has been a step forward for people who do have governments that are just awful and destroying the population. So if you want to buy things on the black market in China, Bitcoin's going to be helpful for you.
And it's interesting too to see in Venezuela, the police go around and arrest Bitcoin miners if they can find them.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's absolutely tragic. So I know a lot of people who who have friends in Venezuela or who have set up charities to try to get Bitcoin to Venezuela. Obviously, you're not going to be able to use Western Union or MoneyGram or one of those because there's just such tight controls on everything there. But sending Bitcoin to someone in Venezuela can change your life.
And that's really important to note too, that there's official channels to send money, but it just doesn't work in some places. People literally don't have access to this, or they have capital controls where you can only get $5 a day from the bank or something. It's completely useless.
Yeah, and not just that, but the fees to send something. If I just want to donate like $10 to someone in Venezuela because maybe things are tight for me, I don't have that much money to spare, it's really not worth it to send $10 because it's going to cost you $30 in transaction fees to go through one of these money transfer places. So how do you send small amounts of money? Well, there are lots of cryptocurrencies that you can send these days that have enough liquidity that you can actually buy things, real things from real stores with this money, and the transfer fees are tiny, absolutely tiny.
One thing that I found really interesting too is all these kind of little jurisdictions, little countries that are going big on blockchain. If I think just across Europe, I mean, Gibraltar's becoming a big center, Slovenia's becoming a big center, Lithuania, Estonia, they're all going big on blockchain and cryptocurrency. Why do you think all these little countries are going, we want to get involved, when big countries like China and India are going, you kind of like blockchain, but we're really worried about this?
Well, I think countries like China, it's a control issue. So they're looking at it and saying, we do not want the country and the population to be empowered in any way, so we will shut this down. In countries like America, perhaps they forgot what made them so prosperous in the first place, because when they had the Bitcoin hearings, when they're talking about implementing the Bitcoin license, all of the rhetoric was just around how do we shut this down, and it was terrible, like the way those hearings went, because you have Lawsky who said, like, was that his name? Ben Lawsky?
I think so. I'm not sure though.
Now involved with Ripple. Anyway, so he's saying, like, I would rather shut down, 1,000 blooming flowers if it meant that we could catch like one criminal doing a bad thing. And that just makes you stop and wonder, like, why the hell would you ever want to shut down 1,000 blooming flowers, meaning like 1,000 innovative companies who are changing the world, changing people's lives for the better, bringing prosperity to the population? And that sort of mindset is incredibly closed. And so perhaps for some of these poorer nations who haven't seen the prosperity that America has, maybe they actually want to set up conditions where they can increase their GDP, where they can raise the standard of living for the people in their country. This innovation makes things cheaper, makes things easier. Lots of different areas of life a lot easier for the population, not to mention bringing in jobs. So when Bitcoin did implement the Bit license, you immediately saw Kraken close its services for people in New York. You could no longer access that. When you had CME offering Bitcoin futures, to start off with, it wasn't available in New York. Like, the innovation in New York for Bitcoin just disappeared. So that's what happens when you have stringent controls. And perhaps some of these other countries, especially in Eastern Europe or in Gibraltar, have recognized that this could be a game changer. This could put them, make them the next financial capital of the world. So I think that they're a lot smarter than some of these other countries who are thinking more in the mindset of control.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm very encouraged when I see what's going on in the tech-wise in places like Estonia or Lithuania, for example, and all the actually really interesting projects that are coming out of those countries. So
yeah, for sure.
Now, I saw a story recently, speaking of Europe, I saw a story recently that the Polish central bank paid a YouTuber to create anti-cryptocurrency ads. What's your thoughts on that?
That's not surprising at all. I mean, the media in so many different countries is really just a tool for whatever government narrative they want out there. You just see total control over the narrative of Bitcoin over the years as well. When it first came out, it's like, oh, this is just for the black market and drug users, and it has no practical use for anyone else at all and never will. So you're a bad person if you use it. And obviously that's changed as people have learned about, and they've been like, oh, wow, this is actually incredible, and is changing the face of finance. So, I mean, like, I think the government probably does a lot more than just pay YouTubers to make
Mm-hmm.
anti-Bitcoin videos. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff going on under the scenes. And as Bitcoin becomes larger, you're going to see a lot more. We've got an epic battle ahead of us. I just did a video, an interview with Ron Paul, where he's talking about this upcoming battle that he foresees between people in cryptocurrency and the government, because it's gives so much power back to the people. You think a government's just going to roll over and let it happen? No, no, no. There's going to be a big battle coming up. So there's going to be a lot more than YouTubers just being paid. We're going to see, you know, huge campaigns by all of the media against Bitcoin, more than we've even seen. We're going to see huge regulations come down. There's going to be a fight. And Ron Paul's advice was, do not concede anything. Do not say, well, we need just a little bit of government to regulate this because that's going to help things. His advice was, do not concede and fight for this. Otherwise, you're going to lose every good, you know, every benefit that you have gained from cryptocurrency.
That's a really good point. And it's actually, when you make these little concessions, right, you have them, one side who's so far in one direction, you make a little concession. And then, like, next year, like, well, just meet us in the middle again, or meet us a little bit in our direction.
The middle of the, like, it's, yeah.
Exactly. They simply never change the position, but you just get drawn away from what you originally wanted, which it can be a very dangerous thing, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to move that into, I guess, talking a little bit about what's been going on with the banks recently, because this, I think, has been a really big story as well. All these different banks, for example, charging Forex fees to buy cryptocurrencies. You know, my brother's been hit with this, for example. He's been buying cryptocurrencies, and I say, wait, foreign exchange fees? I've just been buying, you know, Bitcoin. But, of course, you know, you can go to a casino and buy chips, or you can go to a strip club and buy strip dollars, and that should be a foreign exchange for you too, but they're doing it with cryptocurrencies. Why do you think there's been this big move by banks to find all these different ways to restrict credit card purchases, add in extra fees?
Well, it's incredibly threatening to the banks. I mean, they're losing their business model, and their landscape's been completely transformed right now. So there is no threat that stripper dollars and casino coins are ever going to overtake the US dollar. There is a real threat that Bitcoin might. There's a real threat that some of the other cryptocurrencies might. So obviously they want to curtail that in whatever way possible. So for people who want to get around that, I mean, it's difficult. You're going to have to go through the cumbersome process of doing face-to-face transfers, and that can get dangerous. And so it's government, when you say government can't shut this down, well, they can definitely put pressure on intermediaries and banking institutions and payment processors to make it as difficult as possible, or to stop transactions completely. It's not going to stop Bitcoin. Obviously, it's proven over many, many years that it has enough of a grassroots base that people will keep using it no matter how hard it is. But they can definitely slow and even halt mainstream use adoption. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens in the next few years with this. I mean, maybe you'll just see people operating entirely within the crypto economy, getting paid for their job in crypto, and then paying their rent in crypto, and then buying their groceries in crypto, and people maybe just won't ever transfer out of that. So it's going to be the government's loss if and the bank account's loss if they make it too difficult, because they're just going to lose this entire economy.
That's it. And there's actually so many different services that are already being provided for that. I've covered a story in Japan where you can actually now, there's a company that lets you get your salary paid straight in, you know, Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency of your choice. Supermarkets in South Africa have started accepting Bitcoin. It's coming. It's happening.
Yeah.
You know, so government...
And even then, like, I mean, for years and years and years, you've had services where you can buy gift cards in Bitcoin and basically buy anything from Amazon or wherever using Bitcoin already. So these intermediaries have existed for a long time, and I think that that's probably just going to increase companies like that from growing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about Bitcoin and taxes? What are your thoughts on? I know, right? What are your thoughts on this? I see that Arizona has
taxation is theft. That's my thought.
I know, right?
We're done.
But hey, who's going to pay for the roads if we don't have taxes, right?
Absolutely, dem roads.
Those roads.
My roads.
We all like roads. Now,
They love roads so much. I mean, I think it's cool if governments want to get involved with this and they want to allow people to accept Bitcoin. I mean, that's awesome. I really disagree with with taxation from a moral perspective, but I definitely see it as a step forward to incorporate this rather than try to shut it down.
yeah, definitely, I think a big argument has always been from people, well, if you can't pay your taxes on it, it's not legitimate currency, right? In that sense, I know, right? But some people put that argument forward. But now in Arizona, you're gonna be able to pay your
Yeah.
taxes
I
in
know. So
Bitcoin.
they have no legs left to stand on. They'll find some other straw man argument to throw at you now.
That's it.
And
That's
it's
it.
like when people say, like, do you think Bitcoin has the potential to be used as a real currency? And it's like, well, it was a real currency for years and years and years and years and years. Like people being able to use it to transact. That
Yeah,
seems like it's
that
a currency to me.
that's what
I mean,
makes it a
people say,
currency.
yeah, people say right now, well, it's only people only hold because transaction fees are too high. But then you've got all these other cryptocurrencies where their transaction fees are not too high at all, and yeah, they're real currencies too. This space has been growing like crazy, and more cryptocurrencies have been developed, and people are using it more and more of the time, and more people are entering the space. I mean, yeah, this is already legitimate and has been for a while. And anyone who denies that at this stage, I mean, I'd like to see their definition of currency. Like, it's.
Mm,
I think like perhaps they don't quite understand what currency is, what money is.
I think that's a good observation. And then, a lot of people who look at the US dollar, for example, and assume that it's got some kind of, value backed by
Inherent
something.
value.
Yeah, it's crazy because they just have a money machine that prints out money all day,
Yeah.
propping up, 20 plus trillion dollars in debt, which is a completely unsustainable system. Whereas, of
Yeah.
course, with Bitcoin, we have a deflationary system, which is backed up by a global network of, computers, and it's actually something that can be verified and is legitimate. The US government just loses billions of dollars. Oh, we lost $1 billion yesterday. Don't know what happened to it. Somebody just
Don't know what happened.
left a truck parked somewhere and it's gone now.
Who knows where those top bailouts went? Let us not audit it at all. Let's just keep that opaque for forever.
Shh.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be interesting. So, I mean, imagine a world where everyone pays their taxes in Bitcoin. But imagine a world where it's instantaneously split across all the areas of government that you're actually paying for. Like if I could track my 1 Bitcoin in tax a year and actually see which amount ended up in Senator so-and-so's pocket for his lobster dinner and which amount ended up in this department, and who really knows what that department really does. Like, I think that would perhaps create an awareness of people where their money is actually going, and a transparency in government like we haven't seen before. Whether that will ever happen, I mean, it's very unlikely, but that's a very interesting world where perhaps instead of, transparency for the general public, we actually for once have transparency of government and actually see what's going on and what's being spent where, be a complete turning of the tables. That's interesting to me.
That would be a very interesting situation. I think it's actually going to be necessary for government moving forward. I think that part of this is why they're resisting it as well. We will see some kind of blockchain solutions actually coming in for governance that might replace what we understand as government. And, I look at taxes.
And one of my friends was saying how they really don't like the term governance as well, because it does set up that idea of government in their mind, whereas we're moving into a different paradigm now. So so it'll be interesting to see how people's perceptions of government might change in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that people have a big problem with taxes is that it's so unrepresentative, and that the stuff that you actually get taxed for and then have to pay, I mean, I would never put a penny of my tax money towards killing people in foreign countries.
Right,
or
right.
for propping up, giving subsidies to, oil companies and big agriculture and stuff like this. Like, I would just never spend my tax money on that, but I don't get that choice when I pay
Right.
taxes. They simply
Like if
decide what to do
I
with it.
if I moved into a private community where I signed a contract moving in there that said, if you're going to live in our little private gated community, you have to abide by these rules. That's great because I have the choice of whether or not to move in there. And then if I'm in there and they're like, well, we're going to take a portion, you have to pay this portion a month to pay for maintenance of the lawns and to pay for, we'll take care of your building requirements as well, but pay us a little bit. Then again, I could then choose and say, well, can I do it more cheaply myself and more efficiently myself with my money if I don't pay into this or not? So the idea of paying into something where it's for like a community good, I have no problem with that at all, as long as it's voluntary and as long as if I can do it more cheaply and more efficiently, I'm given that option. So, and as long as, they're not spending that money on something I want. Like if they're like, hey, move into our private community and every 3 weeks we're going to bomb Syria with the money, I'd be like, I'm probably not going to live in that private gated community. That doesn't seem like a good expense for me to be paying for out of my hard-earned money. So I have this huge issue with this idea of forced taxation. If they're going to be spending money on things that I completely disagree with, then I want the option to opt out of that.
Amen.
Yeah.
Now, outside of Bitcoin, what do you see as being some of the most promising cryptocurrencies? What are some of the most promising projects in the space?
Oh, gosh, that's a really hard question. And also, I mean, as I said before, I'm not from a technical background. I'm from an economics background. So I'm probably the worst person to ask this question to, because I'll be like, hey, I really like this thing. Well, I don't understand the tech at all. So, I mean, from my very uninformed perspective, where I just see what's going on and I see awesome people getting involved. I mean, I love the idea of Zcash. I just love the idea of more privacy and money. Monero seems to be doing really well as well. Dash, I recently got funded partially by Dash for a TV series that I'm producing called the Hard Fork series, which is really exciting. And I kind of like the idea of, a masternode system where you can put a portion of the money and it kind of creates this community around the coin. So I think that's really a really interesting model. I mean, there are lots of awesome projects and awesome coins out there. It's really hard to pick and choose. Like in terms of like actual projects, I mean, I see like probably hundreds of ICO pitches a month. And you could say that a lot of them are just like, oh, okay, this, you did this thing and then you just like added blockchain on top. Okay, let's see how that works. Then there's some other ones that are really exciting, actually solving problems by using a distributed system. I on my channel, I interview some of the companies that I really like. I think are doing exciting things, but there's so much out there that it's really hard to pick them out. I mean, I love like Jason King, what he's doing with Academy, just actually working with universities to create more developers in the space. One of the biggest problems we see right now is that there are way too many projects for the number of blockchain developers. So just actually setting up training programs and incentivizing people to enter the space and learn about this, I think that's much needed. And yeah, there are so many.
There's so many. It's crazy though. This is part of the problem too, is that there's 5 new ICOs a day. Right?
Absolutely.
It makes it hard to keep track of anything that's going on.
I'm putting Naomi Brockwell on the blockchain. The blockchain. It's like, no, why does Naomi need to be on the blockchain? That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Like so that she's distributed. I don't know. We're getting into weird territory now. I'll end my analogy there.
Oh, goodness. Well, we're going to finish up here, but I just wanted to give a quick shout out that there's going to be a link down below to your YouTube channel. So anybody who wants to, see more of Naomi and, see some of the content that she's creating, go down there and, subscribe to the channel. Also, I'll have a link for the Twitter as well, so you can follow along. She's always providing lots of great news and insights into the crypto space. So
thank you so much for having me on. This has been fun.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.